The first thing I noticed wasn't the cake. It was the way everyone stopped looking at me at the exact same time, like someone had flipped a switch and turned me from birthday girl into problem. We were 30,000 feet in the air inside a private jet that smelled like expensive perfume, fresh leather, and fake happiness. The cabin lights were warm, the kind that makes everyone's skin look flawless. Soft jazz floated from hidden speakers. Crystal glasses caught the light and threw tiny sparkles onto the ceiling like stars. A perfect scene. A staged one. My name is Isabella Monroe, and on my birthday inside my family's private jet, my own mother publicly erased me. Across from me sat my stepfather, Charles Monroe, relaxed like a man who believed the world was made to obey him. His children, Ryan and Sophie, were dressed like they were attending a gala instead of a family celebration. Ryan kept smirking at his phone, filming short clips. Sophie smiled too much and blinked too little, like she'd rehearsed every expression in a mirror. Near the front, two of Charles's business partners were laughing loudly, the kind of laugh men use when they want everyone to know they're winning at life. One woman, an event stylist, I later learned, kept adjusting napkins and decorations even though we were on a moving aircraft. She kept glancing at me like she was checking whether I looked brand-friendly. My mother, Victoria Monroe, stood near the bar area in a fitted ivory dress, hair perfect, posture perfect, lips painted the exact shade of control. For years, she had been my entire world. After my father died, she held me like I was the last honest thing she had. Then she married Charles, and I became inconvenient. "Smile, Izzy," Sophie said softly, tilting her phone. "It's your moment." I smiled because I'd been trained to, because I still believed, stupidly, that if I stayed warm enough, my mother would stay warm too. The cake came out on a silver tray. Custom made, covered in gold flakes, my name piped in elegant frosting. Candles shaped like numbers flickered as the flight attendant steadied the tray through gentle turbulence. Someone started singing. Half the cabin joined in, out of rhythm, out of heart. I looked at my mother, waiting for her eyes to meet mine. She didn't look back. Her gaze was fixed past me, through me, like I was a chair she'd accidentally left in the walkway. The singing faded, not naturally, deliberately. Charles set his glass down with a clean, sharp click that cut through the air like a warning. Ryan stopped filming for once. Sophie's smile tightened. Victoria took one slow breath and stepped forward. My stomach dropped before any words were spoken. My body understood what my mind refused to accept. This wasn't a celebration. It was a setup. "Isabella," Charles said, voice smooth enough to be mistaken for kindness, "before we continue, we need to address something." I forced a laugh. "What is this, a speech?" No one laughed with me. Victoria finally turned toward me, her eyes calm and cold, like she'd already mourned me and moved on. "This trip," she said, "was meant to be private." "It is private," I replied, confused. "It's literally a private jet." Victoria's lips pressed together. "Not with you here." For a moment, my brain refused to translate the sentence into meaning. I heard the words, but they floated above my head like a language I didn't speak. Charles leaned forward, elbows on his knees, as if he was about to explain something to a child who didn't understand rules. "You've been disruptive," he said. "You create tension, you ask questions that don't need to be asked. You bring up the past, it's exhausting." I blinked. "I ask questions because you keep changing the story." Sophie inhaled sharply like I'd broken a sacred rule by speaking truth out loud. Victoria's expression didn't change. "This is exactly what I mean," she said quietly. "Every moment becomes a battle with you." My chest tightened. "It's my birthday." Ryan smirked like that was the funniest thing he'd heard all week. "That's your problem," he muttered. I looked at my mother. "Mom, what's going on?" She flinched at the word mom. Not emotionally, politically, like it was an inconvenient label in front of witnesses. Charles raised his hand slightly. The flight attendant stepped forward. She looked terrified, like she'd been instructed to do something she didn't agree with. A slim leather bag appeared mine, placed into her hands like evidence. "We have a scheduled stop," Charles said. "A private terminal. You'll get off there?" The cabin went silent in the way rooms go silent right before someone's dignity is taken. I stared at Victoria, waiting for her to say, "No, stop. This isn't happening." She didn't. She stared at me with the face of someone choosing a life that didn't include me. "You're kicking me out," I whispered. Victoria tilted her head. "Don't dramatize." "We're in the air," I said, voice shaking despite my effort. "You're literally removing me from a plane." Charles gave a small shrug. "You'll be safe, there will be a car." A car, like I was being dropped off at school, not thrown out of my own family's orbit. I stood slowly. My knees felt weak, but I locked them anyway. I refused to collapse for their entertainment. My hands shook as I took my bag. The flight attendant wouldn't meet my eyes. I glanced around the cabin again, at the business partners, at the staff, at people who had eaten my mother's food and smiled at me in our home. No one spoke. No one moved. They watched like spectators at a controlled demolition. The jet began descending. The lights dimmed slightly. The hum of the engines changed pitch. Outside the window, darkness stretched like an ocean. I walked toward the door. Each step felt unreal. Like I was floating outside my body, watching a stranger get discarded. At the door, I turned back one last time. "Mom," I said, soft, almost childish, because some part of me still hoped love could override power. "Please." Victoria didn't blink. She didn't stand. She didn't come closer. Instead, she said the sentence that burned itself into my memory forever. "You don't belong in this world anymore, Isabella. Learn that." I stared at her. Then at Charles, then at Ryan and Sophie, smiling now because the show was reaching its climax. The door opened. Cold air rushed in. The smell of fuel and night hit my lungs. A private terminal sat below, like a place designed for people who never want witnesses. My feet touched the steps, and then the door closed behind me. The jet's engines roared. The aircraft turned and lifted away into the dark, carrying my mother, my stepfather, and the version of my life I'd been tricked into believing was mine. I stood there watching until the lights disappeared. Only then did my hands start to tremble violently. Only then did the humiliation sink past my skin and into my bones. Inside the terminal, the lights flickered. A security guard looked at me like he didn't know whether to pity me or avoid me. I sat on a hard plastic chair, clutching my bag, trying to swallow the lump in my throat that felt like a scream trapped behind my ribs. I didn't cry. Not yet. I replayed every moment of my life with Victoria. How she used to sing while making dinner, how she kissed my forehead when I had nightmares, how she promised I would always be her first priority. And then I replayed the last 2 years. The subtle shifts, the way Charles's name replaced mine in her sentences, the way my mother started saying we when she meant them, the way Ryan and Sophie treated me like an intruder in a house I grew up in. I realized something sitting in that terminal. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned. The cake, the witnesses, the timing, the humiliation, they didn't just want me gone, they wanted me discredited. Because if I was too emotional, too unstable, too dramatic, then anything I said later would sound like bitterness, not truth. And there was truth, so much truth, things I'd seen, papers I'd signed, conversations I'd overheard. Numbers I'd understood because I wasn't stupid, just trusting. My phone buzzed. A message from Sophie, "Don't make this ugly, take the hint and disappear." I stared at it. Then I laughed quietly, painfully, because she didn't understand what she'd just given me. A written record, proof of intent. I looked up at the empty ceiling and felt something inside me go very still. Not hope, not forgiveness. Focus. 3 days later, Victoria left a voicemail. Her voice was calm, like she was reading from a script. "This is for your own good. Charles has lawyers. Don't contact us again. Don't post anything. Don't embarrass yourself." I listened once. Then again, then deleted it, because she didn't know what I knew. She didn't know that the world she said I didn't belong in had been built partially on my work, on my ideas, on my signatures, some of which I had copies of. Some of which didn't look as clean as Charles wanted them to. And she definitely didn't know this. When someone humiliates you in public, they assume shame will keep you quiet. But shame doesn't silence everyone. Sometimes it sharpens them. If you're still here, subscribe, because this was only the fall. In part 2, I don't beg, I don't cry, I don't chase the jet. I start collecting the pieces they forgot I was holding. The first time I realized humiliation can be weaponized, I was still sitting in that private terminal, staring at the spot where the jet's lights vanished. But the second time I realized it was 3 days later, when my bank card got declined buying a bottle of water. Not because I was broke, because someone had reached into my life and shut the doors while smiling. I stood at the counter, heat crawling up my neck as the cashier looked at me like I'd lied about being able to pay. I tried again, declined, again, declined. My phone buzzed at the exact same time, like the universe had perfect comedic timing. A text from an unknown number: "Your access has been removed, don't test boundaries." I didn't need a name. I knew the handwriting behind the message: clean, corporate cruelty. Charles, my stepfather, didn't just kick me off the jet. He kicked me out of my identity. Back in my hotel room, cheap, generic, nothing like the world they'd kept me in, I opened my laptop and logged into the family company portal. Password incorrect. I tried my backup credentials. Account disabled? I tried the shared drive where I'd stored contracts I'd reviewed for Victoria, because my mother loved to pretend she didn't need me, while quietly letting me do the work she didn't understand. Permission denied? It was surgical. They didn't just want me gone, they wanted me powerless. I laughed once out loud, because it confirmed something I'd been trying not to believe. This wasn't about me being dramatic. This was about me being dangerous to them. And the worst part, my mother let it happen. I stared at my phone until my eyes burned, then finally called Victoria. It rang twice before she answered, like she'd been waiting. "Isabella," she said, voice soft as silk. "I was just about to reach out." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles went white. "My cards are blocked." A pause. A controlled inhale. "Charles thought it would help you detach," she said, as if stealing from me was therapy. "Detach," I repeated. "You locked me out of my own accounts." "Those accounts were linked to family assets," she replied. "You're not part of that structure anymore." Not part of that structure. I felt my throat tighten. "Mom, you invited me, you put me on that jet." Victoria's voice sharpened just slightly. "And you proved exactly why you shouldn't have been there." I could hear Ryan laughing faintly in the background, like this call was on speaker and I was entertainment. "What did I do?" I asked, steadier than I felt. "Name it." Victoria hesitated one beat too long, then she chose the oldest excuse in the world. "You're always watching, always questioning, it's exhausting." I exhaled through my nose. "You mean I notice things?" Her voice dropped. "Stop." That word wasn't a request, it was a warning. "Isabella," Victoria said, quieter now, "I'm asking you, don't make this harder, walk away." "Or what?" I asked. Silence. Then a new voice entered the call. "Charles." "Isabella," he said like he was greeting an employee, "I hope you're settling in." My stomach turned. "You blocked my funds." Charles chuckled softly. "Correction, I separated you from assets you no longer have rights to." "Rights," I repeated. "You don't even know what I have copies of." The line went dead. He hung up, and my phone buzzed again immediately. A notification: legal notice, cease and desist, sent to my email. They'd prepared paperwork faster than they'd prepared a birthday wish. That was when I stopped feeling hurt. Hurt makes you plead. I started feeling something else. Precision. I spent the next 48 hours doing one thing: reconstructing what they thought they'd erased. I called my bank directly, not the family liaison, not the assistant, the actual fraud department. "Someone froze my accounts without my authorization," I said calmly. "I need a full log of actions and IP locations." The agent hesitated. "Ma'am, the freeze appears to have been requested by, I know who," I cut in, "and it wasn't legal." I filed a dispute. I opened a new account. I transferred what I could recover. I changed every password I still controlled. The first step of revenge isn't dramatic. It's administrative. Then I opened my suitcase and pulled out the one thing I'd never told anyone I kept. A slim folder. Inside, printed contracts, screenshots, and the kind of notes you take when you're the only person in the room paying attention. Because while Charles was busy performing success, I had been reading the fine print. I found the agreement that made my stomach drop. A transfer document Victoria had signed months ago, moving shares into a trust controlled by Charles. The signature was real. The date was not. I stared at it until my eyes went dry. It clicked like a lock opening in my head. That's why they kicked me out publicly. They needed a story. She's unstable. She's emotional. She's not credible. Because the moment I spoke about documents, they wanted everyone to assume it was revenge talk. I wasn't going to give them that, so I did the one thing they wouldn't expect. I didn't attack them. I disappeared. For 2 weeks I said nothing online, no posts, no rants, no exposing my family drama, just quiet. Just movement. I flew home on my own money and rented a small apartment under my middle name, Isabella Carter, the name I had before Charles bought my mother and renamed our lives. Then I visited an old contact. My father's former attorney, Graham Pierce. He had wrinkles now, tired eyes, and the kind of silence that comes from seeing too many families destroy each other with paperwork. He read my folder without speaking. When he finally looked up, his expression had changed. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "I kept it," I said. He exhaled slowly. "This isn't just messy, this is potentially criminal." I didn't smile. "I know." Graham tapped the transfer document. "If the date was altered, if there's any falsification, Charles is exposed." "And my mother?" I asked, voice tight. Graham's eyes softened for a second. "Your mother signed something she didn't understand, or she understood and did it anyway." That sentence hit like a punch. I swallowed hard. "What do I do?" Graham leaned back. "If you want revenge, you can go loud. Media, lawsuits. Public humiliation?" I pictured Victoria's face on that jet. The cold eyes, the way she watched me step into the night without blinking. I pictured Ryan and Sophie smiling. Then I pictured the boardrooms, the investors. The charities Victoria loved to post about, women supporting women, while she crushed her own daughter in first class. I looked at Graham. "I don't want loud." He raised an eyebrow. "I want surgical," I said. Graham nodded slowly. "Then you need leverage that can't be dismissed as emotions." I already had a plan forming, because there was one place Charles couldn't rewrite reality: the numbers. The company was preparing for a major acquisition, something I'd overheard months earlier when Charles thought I was just listening. If that deal closed, Charles would become untouchable. So I needed to strike before it happened. But I also needed one thing I didn't have yet: proof, not suspicion, not paperwork with convenient errors. Proof that Charles had altered records, using my mother as the signature and my reputation as the scapegoat. That night, I opened my laptop and searched my old emails, deep, buried threads, and I found it. A message from the Jets event stylist sent weeks before my birthday. Subject line: Isabella plan confirmed. My blood ran cold as I read the first sentence. Per Victoria's request, we'll need the removal moment to happen after the cake for maximum witness impact. Removal moment. They had named my humiliation like it was a scene in a show. I stared at the screen, hands shaking, not from fear, from clarity. If you're still listening, subscribe, because part 2 wasn't about revenge yet. It was about discovery. And in part 3, I'm going to meet the one person who was on that jet and shouldn't have been, someone who saw everything, and kept a recording that Victoria never knew existed. The message came from a number I didn't recognize. No name, no emoji, just one sentence. "You don't know me, but I was on the jet and I have something you need." I stared at the screen for a full minute before breathing again. My heart didn't race, it slowed, because when revenge is real, it doesn't arrive with drama, it arrives with timing. I replied carefully. "Who is this?" The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "My name is Daniel Wright. I was hired as a consultant for Charles Monroe's acquisition deal. I wasn't supposed to be on that flight, but your mother insisted." My jaw tightened. Victoria insisted. Of course she did. "What do you have?" I typed. There was a pause long enough to feel intentional. Then, "A recording, not the kind you think. And before you ask, yes, it includes the part where they planned your removal." I closed my laptop slowly and leaned back in the chair. The room felt very still. This was it. The witness they never calculated. We met the next afternoon in a quiet cafe on the edge of the financial district. Neutral ground, public enough to feel safe, private enough to talk. Daniel Wright wasn't what I expected. Mid-40s, calm, ordinary, the kind of man who blends into boardrooms and airports without leaving fingerprints. He wore no watch, no flashy suit, just someone who lived in margins. He didn't smile when he saw me. He nodded once. "You look exactly like they described." I raised an eyebrow. "How did they describe me?" He exhaled. "Unstable, emotional, a liability." I laughed once, humorless. "Of course." Daniel slid his phone across the table but didn't let go of it. "I didn't come here for revenge," he said. "I came because I don't like being used as cover." "Cover for what?" I asked. "For a narrative," he replied. "Your removal wasn't personal to them, it was procedural." That word again, procedural. He tapped the phone. The jet had a live internal recording system. Charles wanted a record of conversations for security reasons. Your mother approved it. Approved it. Daniel looked me in the eye. "They forgot one thing, I was copied on the access." My pulse thudded once. "Why keep it?" I asked. Daniel's jaw tightened. because halfway through that flight I realized something illegal was being discussed. And I protect myself? I nodded slowly. What do you want? Daniel leaned back. I want my name nowhere near what's coming, and I want immunity if this turns into a war. I didn't hesitate. You'll get both. He unlocked the phone and pressed play. The audio started before the cake. Victoria's voice was clear, sharp, decisive, not the soft version she used with me. She can't be part of this going forward, my mother said. The deal closes in 6 weeks. Isabella complicates perception. Charles responded calmly. Then we do it cleanly, publicly, tonight. Ryan laughed. On her birthday, brutal. Victoria didn't laugh. She needs to understand she's out, she said. If she cries, good. If she explodes, better. Either way, no one will take her seriously later. My stomach twisted, but I didn't stop listening. Charles's voice again. The removal has to feel justified, emotional instability, entitlement. Classic, Victoria, she'll question it, she always does. Charles, then make sure there are witnesses. Sophie's voice cut in, light, amused. I'll record my angle just in case. Victoria paused, then said something that cut deeper than anything else. I raised her to be strong, she said. Now she's strong enough to survive this. The audio continued details about timing, the terminal, the staff. They called it the exit. They laughed. Daniel stopped the recording. I sat there, hands folded, breathing carefully, not crying, not shaking, just reorganizing reality. She didn't hesitate, I said quietly. Daniel shook his head. No, she let it. I closed my eyes. This wasn't betrayal, this was strategy. Can you verify the authenticity? I asked. Daniel nodded. Metadata, timestamps, location, it's clean. I looked at him. Why come to me? Because I heard Charles talking later, Daniel replied. He said if you ever spoke, they'd discredit you using the same narrative they used on the jet. I smiled faintly. They already started. Daniel stood. Then you'll need to move faster than they expect. He slid the phone back into his pocket. I'll send you a copy, he said. Encrypted, after that I disappear. You won't testify? I asked. He met my eyes. You won't need me to. That night, alone in my apartment, I listened to the recording again and again. Not because I needed proof, because I needed to hear my mother's voice without the mask. The woman who once promised to protect me, the woman who chose optics over blood. I didn't scream, I didn't break anything. I opened my laptop and created a new folder. Monroe Acquisition Pre-Close Review inside it. I placed the jet recording, the altered transfer document, the stylists, Isabella plan, email, internal memos. I still had access to a timeline that connected everything. Then I did something important. I didn't send it to the media. I sent it to 3 people. Charles's largest silent investor, the compliance head overseeing the acquisition, and ethics partner at the firm representing both companies. No accusations. No emotion. Just facts and one sentence. Please review prior to close. Disclosure risk identified. I shut the laptop and waited. The first response came 12 hours later from the compliance head. We need to talk. The second came from the investor. Do not forward this further. We are investigating. The third came from my mother, not a voicemail, a text. Isabella, whatever you think you're doing, stop. I stared at the message. Then typed back one line. You should have said that on the jet. The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, appeared again, then nothing. For the first time since my birthday, I felt something close to peace, because revenge isn't loud. It's watching powerful people realize the room has shifted, and they're no longer controlling the exit. If you're still listening, subscribe. Because in part 4, the acquisition freezes, the board turns, and my mother is forced to choose between saving her husband or finally telling the truth about why she let her daughter fall out of the sky. The morning the acquisition froze, I didn't celebrate. I poured coffee, black, no sugar, and watched my phone light up like a city during a blackout. Missed calls, unknown numbers, emails marked urgent. The silence they'd wrapped around me for weeks shattered all at once. At 7:14 a.m., the first headline dropped, not public, not viral, just a quiet industry alert sent to the people who mattered. Monroe Astor deal paused pending compliance review. Paused, not canceled, not approved. Paused is the word executives fear most because it means eyes are on you. I sat down and breathed slowly, counting to 4 like my father once taught me when panic tried to own my body. I wasn't panicking, I was preparing. At 7:21 a.m. my phone rang. Victoria, I let it ring. At 7:23 a.m., a text followed. Isabella, please answer. This is bigger than you. Bigger than me. I smiled at the irony and finally picked up. Her voice was tight, stripped of polish. What did you send? Documents, I replied calmly. Recordings, timelines. A sharp inhale. You had no right. You removed me from a plane, I said, in public on my birthday. We're far past rights. There was movement on her end, papers shuffling, footsteps. I could picture her pacing the way she did when control slipped through her fingers. You've put Charles in danger, she said. I paused. No. I put the truth in front of people who can read. Silence. Then her voice dropped. They're asking questions about the jet, about the transfer dates, about why you were listed as an internal reviewer. Because I was, I said. Until you decided optics mattered more than honesty? She didn't deny it. That's when I knew the leverage was real. By noon, the board had convened an emergency call. I wasn't invited. I didn't need to be. At 12:37 p.m., an email came from the compliance head. Due to potential disclosure risk, all related parties are advised to preserve records and refrain from internal communications. That sentence translates to, stop talking before you incriminate yourselves. At 12:45 p.m., Daniel Wright texted me one last time. They're scrambling, you timed this perfectly, I'm stepping away now. I replied with one word. Safe, and he disappeared just like he promised. The real turning point came that evening. A knock at my door, not loud, not aggressive. Controlled, I checked the peephole. Victoria, alone, no Charles, no driver, no armor. I opened the door slowly. She looked smaller than I remembered, tired, not broken, but cracked. Her hair was still perfect, but her eyes were searching, calculating exits like a chess player who just lost a queen. We need to talk, she said. I stepped aside. She entered my apartment like it was foreign territory, glancing at the modest furniture, the bare walls, the life I rebuilt without her approval. You didn't have to do this, she said quietly. I leaned against the counter. You didn't have to push me out of a jet. She flinched. That was necessary, she said. You were a liability. I let the word hang between us. A liability, I repeated. To what? To stability, she replied. To the deal, to the future. I shook my head. No, to the lie. Her jaw tightened. You don't understand how much was at stake. I stepped closer. Then explain it to me fully for once. She looked away. That was the moment, the fork in the road where mothers choose either truth or preservation. Victoria exhaled. Charles needed everything clean, no loose ends. The transfer document, you were never supposed to see the date. So you altered it, I said. She swallowed. He asked me to sign. I did, knowing it wasn't accurate. Yes. The room felt very quiet. And the jet? I asked. Her voice dropped. We needed witnesses. We needed a narrative. If you spoke later, they'd say you were emotional, unstable, acting out. So you sacrificed me, I said softly. As insurance? She looked up at me then, eyes wet but still guarded. I told myself you'd survive it. I laughed once. You told yourself a story so you could sleep. Her shoulders sagged. For a second, I saw the woman she used to be, the one who held my hand when my father died, the one who promised I'd never be alone. Then it was gone. They're offering a deal, she said, if you retract. If you claim the recording was taken out of context. I stared at her. And you came here to ask me to lie, to protect us, she said. Us, I asked. You mean Charles? She didn't answer. I nodded slowly. There it is. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. A new email, this one from the ethics partner. Given emerging evidence, we require sworn statements from all signatories, including Victoria Monroe. I showed her the screen. Her face drained of color. They're forcing you to choose, I said gently. Not me. She sank into a chair, suddenly older than her years. If I tell the truth, it ends him. And if you don't, I replied, it ends you. She looked up at me, eyes trembling. I never meant to lose you. I met her gaze. You already did. She stood slowly. I need time. I opened the door. You already used it. She paused at the threshold. What do you want? I didn't hesitate. The truth. On record. She nodded once and left. That night I didn't sleep. Not from fear, from anticipation. Because the next day the board would demand answers. And my mother would have to decide whether to protect the man who built his empire by erasing me or finally step into the light and admit how far she went to keep a seat at his table. If you're still listening, subscribe. Because in part 5, the board meeting explodes, the truth goes on record, and the woman who pushed me out of the sky learns what it costs to land on a lie. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock a.m. By 8:42, the room was already sealed. No assistants, no phones, no side conversations, glass walls, long table. Men and women who didn't raise their voices because they never had to. Power sat in tailored suits and unreadable faces. I wasn't there. That was the mistake, because people assume silence means absence. They forget how often silence is preparation. At 8:55, Charles Monroe walked in like a man who still believed control was a posture. Calm, polished, confident enough to look bored. He nodded at investors, adjusted his cufflinks, and took his seat at the head of the table like gravity owed him respect. My mother, Victoria, arrived last. She didn't sit next to him. That alone shifted the air. The compliance head cleared his throat. Before we proceed, we need to address material disclosures related to the Monroe-Astor acquisition. Charles smiled faintly. Of course. The first document appeared on the screen. The altered transfer agreement. Charles leaned back, relaxed. That document has already been reviewed. The compliance head nodded. Yes, and we noticed a discrepancy in the execution date. Charles glanced at Victoria. Just for a second, she didn't look back. The room quieted. The ethics partner spoke next. We also received an audio file recorded aboard a private aircraft on the evening of April 12th. Charles's jaw tightened. Aboard my aircraft? He asked lightly. Yes, the partner replied. Authorized under your internal security policy approved by Victoria Monroe. All eyes turned to my mother. She felt them. I know she did. Because later she told me that was the exact moment she realized there was no way out that didn't cost her something permanent. The audio began to play, not the whole thing, just enough. Victoria's voice filled the room, controlled, decisive, unmistakable. She complicates perception. Charles's voice followed. Then we do it publicly tonight. Ryan's laugh, Sophie's comment, and then the sentence that sealed everything. If she cries, good. If she explodes, better. Silence. Not shock, not outrage, calculation. The kind that happens when investors realize risk has a pulse. Charles leaned forward slowly. This is being taken out of context. The compliance head didn't blink. Context won't change intent. Charles turned to Victoria. You approved this recording? She closed her eyes, then opened them. Yes, she said. That single word cracked the room. Charles stared at her. Victoria, I approved it, she repeated, louder this time, and I knew exactly why. The ethics partner interjected. Miss Monroe, we require your sworn statement regarding the altered transfer document. Victoria's hands trembled on the table. For the first time in decades, she wasn't managing optics. She was choosing. That document, she said quietly, was altered at Charles's request. The room shifted. Charles stood abruptly. This is absurd. Victoria looked up at him, and for the first time in my adult life, she didn't protect him. She was meant to be removed, my mother said. My daughter, Isabella, the jet was planned, the witnesses were intentional, the narrative was designed. A pause. She was never unstable, Victoria continued. She was inconvenient. That word again. Only now it wasn't aimed at me, it was aimed at him. The compliance head closed the file. Thank you, that will be entered into the record. Charles's voice rose. You can't seriously be considering? We are, the ethics partner replied calmly. The acquisition is terminated. The words landed like a guillotine. Terminated. Charles laughed once. Sharp. You're destroying years of work. No, the partner said. You destroyed it the moment you weaponized your family. Security entered, not aggressively, just present. A reminder that power changes hands quietly. Charles turned to Victoria, disbelief bleeding into fury. You chose her, Victoria stood. I chose the truth, she said. I just wish I'd chosen it sooner. He looked around the room, searching for support. There was none, because power doesn't forgive exposure. I found out 2 hours later, not from my mother, from a news alert. Monroe-Astor deal terminated amid governance concerns. I stared at the screen for a long time. No joy, no rush, just finality. My phone rang. Victoria, I let it ring once, then answered. It's done, she said. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. I know, a long silence followed. I told them everything, she continued. On record. I know, I said again, her voice broke. I lost him. I closed my eyes. You lost me first? Another silence, this one heavier. Isabella, she whispered, I don't expect forgiveness. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the city outside my window, the one I rebuilt myself into. Good, I said. Because I'm not offering it. She inhaled shakily. What happens now? I thought about the jet, the night air, the door closing. You live with the truth, I replied. The same way I had to. She didn't argue, she couldn't. Charles was removed from the board by sunset. His accounts were frozen pending investigation. His name quietly disappeared from charities and conferences. Not because people suddenly cared about ethics, but because nobody wants proximity to fallout. Ryan and Sophie went silent online. No posts, no stories, they'd learned something too. Silence isn't always strength, sometimes it's survival. That night I slept. For the first time since my birthday, I slept without replaying the jet in my mind. But the story wasn't finished, because consequences don't end with collapse. They end with what you build afterward. And in part 6, the final part, I walk back into the world they said I didn't belong in, not to beg, not to explain, but to reclaim the life they tried to erase. If you're still here, subscribe, because the fall was public, but the return, that will be unforgettable. The invitation arrived without an apology. No explanation, no acknowledgement of what had been done to me, just a name, a place, and a time. Monroe Global Foundation Annual Summit, New York City, Main Hall. The same foundation my mother once chaired, the same room where I'd been introduced for years as Victoria Monroe's daughter, never as myself. I stared at the email for a long time. They didn't want reconciliation. They wanted optics. They wanted to show the world that everything was moving forward. And for the first time since the jet, I realized something powerful. They no longer controlled the narrative. I did. On the night of the summit, the city glowed the way it always does when money pretends to be purpose. Black cars lined the street. Cameras flashed. People smiled too wide and shook hands too quickly. I arrived alone. No security. No entourage. No borrowed confidence. Just me, Isabella Monroe. Inside, the room hummed with low conversation and restrained curiosity. People noticed me immediately, not with pity, not with power, but with uncertainty. I didn't belong in their story anymore. That made me dangerous. I felt it in the pauses, in the way conversations stalled when I passed, in the eyes that followed me trying to decide whether to approach or avoid. My mother stood near the stage, speaking quietly with a donor. She hadn't seen me yet. When she did, she froze. For a moment, she looked exactly like she did on the jet, caught between worlds, calculating the cost of every possible move. I didn't wave, I didn't smile. I took my seat in the front row, exactly where I used to sit before I was erased. The program began, speeches about accountability, panels about transparency. Words polished so clean they almost looked innocent. I listened without reacting, because I wasn't here to interrupt. I was here to finish something. When my name was called, the room didn't applaud immediately. They hesitated. That hesitation was everything. I walked to the podium slowly, steady, grounded. I didn't look at my mother, I looked at the audience. Thank you, I began, my voice calm, for inviting me. A few people shifted uncomfortably. I wasn't sure I'd come, I continued. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to be clear about why I'm here. Silence. I was publicly removed from my family 3 months ago, I said, not privately, not quietly. Publicly, murmurs rippled through the room. I was told I didn't belong in a world that I helped build, that I was unstable, emotional, inconvenient. I paused. Tonight I'm not here to argue that. The room leaned in. I'm here to say this: being removed didn't make me smaller, it made me precise. Some people nodded, others stiffened. I learned something important when I was pushed out of that jet, I said. Power doesn't fall apart when it's challenged. It falls apart when it's exposed. I finally glanced at my mother. She was pale. I won't speak about investigations, I continued. I won't speak about deals or documents, that's already on record. A beat. But I will speak about what happens when families use humiliation as strategy and call it leadership. The word leadership landed heavy. This foundation talks about ethics, I said, so let me be ethical. I took a breath. I'm stepping away from everything that carries my family's name. Gasps. I'm returning every title, every benefit, every symbolic role that once connected me to power I didn't choose. I removed the badge from my jacket and placed it on the podium. "I'm not doing this to punish anyone," I said. "I'm doing it to free myself." The room was completely silent now, and before anyone wonders, no, I added, "This is not revenge." I met the eyes of a woman in the third row, someone who'd once smiled at me like I was decoration. "This is reclamation?" Applause began slow at first, uncertain, then stronger, real. I stepped back from the microphone and walked off the stage. No questions, no interviews, no explanations. Outside, the air felt lighter, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. "I saw you." I typed back one line. "So did everyone else." She didn't reply, and for the first time that didn't hurt. Weeks passed. I declined interviews. I ignored headlines. I watched as the world moved on to the next scandal, the next fall from grace. Quietly, I started something new, not a foundation, not a brand, a firm, one that specialized in governance audits, internal ethics reviews, and quiet accountability, the kind that prevents humiliation before it's weaponized. Clients came faster than I expected. Executives who didn't want to become headlines, boards that wanted truth without theater. They didn't come because of my name, they came because of my story. And because I understood something most people don't: power is loud, control is louder, but independence is silent and permanent. One evening, months later, I boarded a plane, commercial, window seat, no champagne. No gold accents, no audience. As the plane lifted into the sky, I didn't flinch. I smiled. Because this time I wasn't being taken anywhere, I was choosing where to go. The jet taught me how quickly people will throw you away to protect themselves. The fall taught me how to build a life no one can take from me again. And if you're still here, still listening, subscribe. Because some stories don't end with revenge, they end with freedom. And freedom is the one thing they never thought I'd take back.